You or someone you love needs help for an addiction. Where do you turn? Foundations Recovery Network offers individualized treatment for the whole person. Our goal goes beyond short-term sobriety. We address substance abuse and co-occurring mental health issues together, providing a firm foundation for long-term recovery. The first step is often the hardest, but we're here with a free assessment, insurance information, and treatment options. Our confidential helpline is available 24/7, so call 877-714-1318 and discover the Foundations Recovery Network difference today.
This is Rich Roll, and you're listening to Sober Guy Radio.
Yo, what's up? Thank you for tuning in today. Thanks to Humans for bringing us in. Thanks to you for supporting the show. I'm Shane Raymer, and you're listening to the Friday episode of That Sober Guy podcast. Today's guest is Nathan Rich. Nathan was born in Hollywood to a Scientologist family, and after being sent to the infamous abusive Mace-Kingsley Ranch twice, not once, but twice, he escaped and was disowned by his family. He spent 7 years as a homeless drug addict before turning his life around. Nathan appeared on the Scientology and the Aftermath series produced by ex-Scientologist and actress Leah Remini. And he's since written a memoir called My Survival of a Cult, Abandonment, Addiction, and Homelessness. And we're going to talk to Nathan today. I'm super pumped to talk with him. But before we get to Nathan, be sure to check us out at thatsoberguy.com for past episodes and resources. You can also connect with us on Instagram at RealThatSoberGuy and on Twitter at Shane Raymer. We got a live show coming up at Journey Coffee in Vacaville, California, October 18th. Come drink some coffee with us, hang out. We're going to be talking about recovery and community. We'd love to see you there. You can go to thatsoberguy.com and click on the live events tab if you'd like some more info. And then also check out the TSG, That Sober Guy merch store. We got men's shirts, shirts for ladies, hoodies. The zip-up hoodie's my favorite. Got some coffee mugs. I think there's even a sick TSG phone case. I think about it. We all on our phones. We have our phones all the time. Unfortunately, that's not always a good thing. I'm trying to limit myself on that tip. But what a better way to stay connected to your recovery by having a phone, little logo, little TSG phone case to remind your ass every time you pick that dumbass phone up. Help support us, support your recovery, get your merch today. That's soberguy.com. Click on the store tab. I want to read a quick email and then we're going to get to Nathan here. This says, hey Sharon, I just wanted to reach out and let you know how much your podcast has been helping me as I try to navigate the sober life. I recently celebrated 1 year. Recently celebrated my 1 year anniversary, and I dare to say that I'm happy. P.S. We have a 7-pound white long-haired Chihuahua, and I'm the only one that walks her. I'm 6'1" and 250 pounds. I also wonder what people think of me when she prances around with her pink harness, but she's so damn cute. I don't care. Michael from Brooklyn. Number one, Michael, thanks, man, for reaching out. Much love from Cali to Brooklyn, and congrats on your 1 year. And then for those of you who didn't hear last Friday's episode, I believe it was titled, does it make me a pussy if I walk a small dog? Because I had this thought as I was walking my small dog around the neighborhood. Damn, people probably look at me and think, look at this pussy walking this small-ass dog. So I kind of proposed that question, and Michael, being 6'1" and 250, says he doesn't give a shit. I don't give a shit either. So, Michael, thank you so much, man. Much love to you and all the homies out in Brooklyn. Nathan Rich, all the way from China. What's up to you, man? How are you?
How's it going, Shane? Before we even get started, I just have to mention one thing.
Yes.
Which is that in China, one of the differences that you notice between America and China is that in China, all the house husbands, all the manly dudes, all the tough guys, they all walk the dogs, and they don't have big dogs here because it's all apartments. So every morning I can go outside and I can see some big, tough dude smoking a cigarette, wearing like a wife beater shirt, walking a tiny little poodle. Absolutely
That is epic right there, bro. That is great. So no big dogs, no German Shepherds, no pits, like none of that out there. It's all little.
Not at all. Yeah, because they just have, there's no houses. It's all apartments.
Yeah.
So there's too many people. But it's great to be on your podcast. I've listened to several of your episodes, especially the more recent ones. And I think it's great what you're doing. It's talking about sobriety, talking about recovery is something that is important to people that need to hear that kind of thing. It's something that I didn't have myself. I didn't have the opportunity to, when I was going through my kind of problems, I didn't have a podcast to listen to. I don't even think podcasts existed back then.
Yeah.
So it's great.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. Thank you. And we chatted a little bit before I hit the record button. And yeah, I mean, that's what this is about. It's about talking about recovery, trying to get people together, provide additional resources, of course, in addition to any different types of programs or whatever anyone's going through. And also, man, it's really just to have some fun too. I mean, how many of us in recovery, I get that question a lot, like, well, if I'm sober, how am I still going to have fun? Like, there's all types of ways to have fun. There's all types of things you can do. You don't have to be some lame duck, because you're sober. It's actually, the best time of my life being sober. And I found that, it ain't easy all the time. And it's taken some time to learn that. But hey, real quick too, I wanted to mention, your book, and I know that the memoir. Can you pronounce the title for me, the beginning title? Because I said the second part, but I didn't want to mess up the first part, so I wanted to let you do that.
Sure. So the title of it is Scythe Tleppo.
Okay.
And so Scythe is kind of like the Grim Reaper's, tool, the tool that you would use, before people had lawnmowers. And Tleppo is not a real word; it's just Tleppo. And when I was writing the book, I looked up advice for titling books, and they said don't use anything that's hard to remember, and don't use anything that's hard to spell. And I said, well, too bad. I'm going to call it. The title is one of those titles where if you haven't read the book, it doesn't really make any sense. But once you read the book, hopefully you think to yourself, "There's no way he could have called it anything else." That is the title of this book. And so the book covers my it's a memoir, so it's not an autobiography, meaning it doesn't include every single thing about my entire life. It focuses mostly on how I was raised and how I ended up eventually being homeless and addicted, and how I eventually got out of that. So that's kind of the difference between a memoir and an autobiography. It's not like a sort of boring documentary style book where I'm telling you every fact and detail and date. It's more just a story of here's what happened in my life.
Yeah. And
my story really is that I was born in LA, and I was born to a Scientologist family, and a very, you could say, devout Scientologist family. And I just kind of never took to it. It wasn't my thing, and I was kind of rebelling against it. And because, we're here to talk about addiction, I'm not going to really get sidetracked into a lot about the sort of, cult ideas and all the Scientology stuff. But suffice to say, I wasn't into it. And they sent me to this kind of boarding school to sort of correct me back into believing into it, right, when I was 8. And that was a very abusive place. And that was on Scientology. In the aftermath, they talked about that place. There was beatings and other psychological and physical abuse. And so then when I got out of there,
that was the ranch, right?
Yeah. So that place was called the Mace-Kingsley Ranch, or the Ranch for short, or the MK Ranch. And
I saw, I want to say it was the Kingsley lady in the interview. Man, she was creepy looking, man. She had the red hair and the, is that her?
Yeah. So that's Carol Kingsley. That's probably did you see my attack video, like my attack page?
So let me just say real quick, man. And you said you're more than welcome to get into as high level or as deep as you want to go on this, but I usually, do at least about an hour of pre-production stuff before I go on with the guests. You know what I mean? I want to learn a little bit and get in. Bro, I found myself like 4 hours deep, like digging and just like, whoa. I mean, I had heard Leah's interview on Joe Rogan, like there's probably a year ago by now. My wife and I, we were coming back from Tahoe, I think. And, I listen to Joe's podcast quite often, and I had put that one on. So I had known a little background about what was going on and kind of her story. The series, I want to say it had already came out, or it was just about to launch, or somewhere around there. So I was familiar with it. But then, you know, after you reached out to me, I started digging into this more, bro. I mean, there's so much to that, man. And it's obviously it's interesting. And at the same time, it sounds like it's pretty jacked up too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, Scientology's got a lot of problems, and it had a lot of problems being a kid growing up in it, you know. And so last year, I think it was last year when Leah Remini was on Joe Rogan. She was promoting the second season. So there was already a first season. So I was on the second season. And so, you know, my episode is, you know, it's not just my episode. There's somebody else on there too. My friend Tara Riley.
Yeah.
But the episode that I was in is episode 7, and it's called The Ranches. And it focuses on these Mace-Kingsley Ranch. And the reason that they call it the ranches plural is because the ranch moved later. And so there's kind of 2 different ranches. And I went to both of them, actually. So lucky me. So the first one, there was, you know, there was beatings, and there was, you know, kind of sick and messed up punishments, including, you know, there was child molestation, and the guy running the place it admitted to molestation, and it's a whole nightmare there. And that was out in Palmdale.
Yeah.
And so I was there for about 8 months.
One of the things too, I wanted to point this out just for those out there listening too, because when I was doing some pre-production on this too, I said, okay, I've heard a lot of stuff about Scientology. I've heard about, you know, people's stories, what it is. In all fairness and somewhat, let me look into this myself. Let me see what they claim it is, right? So what I found was the idea that you will be and can be your best self for you and the planet. That was kind of the basis of what I came across, at least to my understanding. Can you kind of give very, very briefly, like, is that accurate? Or like for someone out there listening who has only heard the word Scientology, they don't know what the hell it is. Like, what is the basis of it? If there's any more to it that I missed?
Yeah. So that's kind of like I don't want to say the sales pitch, but that's kind of like what they're saying the benefit might be, right? So if you ask a Christian, what do you believe? And they tell you, well, we can, you know, we have grace and love and we can all get along. That's not real. That's not really an answer. That's not necessarily what the religion is specifically about. That's the benefits of being a part of that religion. And so that answer is kind of like what they would say that the benefits are. And then the separate thing from that is, well, what are the specific beliefs that they have? And so the specific beliefs that they have are, you know, it's very complicated and long, but essentially their point is that we are all these eternal beings that used to be godlike, and now we're, you know, we're sort of in our own prisons of control. Like we don't have any power anymore, and doing, you know, by that religion, you know, you could unravel all that and go back to your native godlike state. So it's not a religion in the traditional sense, in that there's not a deity, there's not a higher power that you're resigning to. There's not there's no prayers, there's no you know, there's no offsetting of responsibility or destiny. There's none of that type of stuff. It's all you.
Well, and that's one of the things my wife said. So you know, so they don't have a God. And I said, well, L. Ron Hubbard was the creator of Scientology, right? Is it looked at as he's kind of the God in a sense?
If you ask a Scientologist that, they'll say no, but some of the ex-Scientologists talk about it now in retrospect, kind of like, wow, we sort of treated that guy like a god because we believe everything he says. Yeah. Cannot question it, etc. You know, but we didn't literally view him as an unkillable, an all-knowing God.
Got it.
And I cover a lot of this in the book, actually. The book is a bit more about Scientology. It's kind of, if I had to say what it was about, it's obviously all about me, but it covers a lot of Scientology, and it also covers a lot of homelessness and addiction. And the way that I talk about Scientology in the book is not for ex-Scientologists. It's for people like you who maybe heard of it and don't really know.
Yeah.
I don't try to like explain the entire thing. I try to tell my story, but I explain things here and there that might need to be explained. And as you get through the story, you kind of get an idea of how they look at life and what they're all about, because I was in the depths of it. I mean, I was a baby growing up in it,
Yeah.
Well,
and that's one of the things I was over at my mother and father-in-law's last night, and we were talking a little bit about it, and we were talking about that, like when you're a kid, no matter what religious organization or whatever it is, if your parents put you in that, you don't really have a choice. So you're growing up in that. That's really all you know. And to break that mental prison or that state of mind that all you know has got to be, it's got to be a pretty challenging thing. And I think that's what we're about to get into here in a minute. But yeah. So go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I had to do that while I was homeless. So we're gonna find out how fun that was.
So take it back to the ranches. I think that's kind of where we left off. You had mentioned that you were at both ranches at some point. Maybe start there.
Right. So when I was 8 years old, I was at the first incarnation of this ranch, which was the more physically abusive of the two. This was, on the episode that I was on in Aftermath, they play an audio sample, an audio recording of the guy who ran the place hitting a child and yelling at him and stuff. It's real. So I was at that ranch with that guy. So that was the one when I was 8. And then my whole family, I never had a father because him and his side of the family were disconnected from. One of the things that Scientologists are into is disconnecting from people who are against Scientology or not strong supporters of it, or there's some complications there. But basically, oftentimes they get disconnected. So I never knew my father or my father's side. I had no siblings. So, and my mother was 22 when she had me, so she was quite young. And all my aunts and grandparents lived in other cities, so it was always just me and my mother. So I got sent away to this place, and my grandfather was the only other person who wasn't a Scientologist in the family. He died while I was in there, so then I got taken out. That's how I left, and then the whole family moved to Florida, and that's because that's the headquarters of Scientology, a certain place in Florida. So we all moved out there.
All their little creepy suits they walk around in.
Yeah, I call them the sailor outfits.
Yeah, they do look like that.
Yeah, exactly. So then, I'm going to skip ahead of some of this stuff, but basically what happened is 7th grade rolled around, and by this time now, I had never once finished one single grade of school, because all of the grades that I had been to, all of the schools I had been to were Scientology schools, and I just didn't want to do Scientology. I was just pushing back, and I would get kicked out. And I had skipped 3 grades. So I skipped preschool, and I skipped 2nd grade and 5th grade. I just had like no schooling, no chance.
Yeah.
And I happened to get into a private school that was a non-Scientology school for the first time in my life. And I did excellent there, very, very well for 2 years, 7th and 8th grade. I know this sounds a little boring, but it's leading up to something.
No, you're good, man. Dude, no, all good.
So I had the first time in my life I was doing well in school, but then I had to enter into high school. Okay. And for high school, I no longer was going to have the same one teacher that I had in 7th and 8th. Mm-hmm. And this teacher, Frank Unitowski at Dunedin Academy, he was basically the reason that I was able to do so well. He was my first male mentor that was an expert in his field. I was learning from him. I wasn't learning about Scientology stuff anymore. Now I was learning math and science and reading and English and the world and social studies. So I got really excited. I did really well for 2 years. They even called me the junior high valedictorian, which is kind of like,
no, that's awesome too. And the fact that you grew up without a father, here's this man who's teaching you kind of somewhat probably how to be a man, how to learn. And like you said, a mentor, that was probably not only are you learning, math, English, history, all that worldly stuff, but you're also building a relationship there, which sounds like it was probably one of the first healthy relationships that you had.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And part of the reason I was learning that stuff was for him.
Yeah.
You know, and I discuss this a bit in the book as well. But my mother did something to him later that was kind of like a betrayal to me. She wrote a report on him and turned it into Scientology, basically saying that she thought he might be gay and that she didn't know if some others, you know, basically she couldn't believe that I was getting good grades, and she kind of attacked this relationship that I had with him. And that was a real backstab for me. So then high school's coming in, and now I can't have him for all of the grades, right? So now I have all these different teachers for all the different classes, and I only get like 2 electives with him, and I'm really in trouble. I've only finished 2 school years. Freshman year starts. This is now 1996, and basically what happens is I end up trying to find a way out. How do I get out of this situation? I got thrown out of a window at school. There was kids selling drugs. I wasn't into drugs. I wasn't into anything. I hadn't drank alcohol. I mean, the worst thing I had done was smoke cigarettes at that point. And so I actually joined those guys in what's called the Sea Org. So I was wearing the sailor outfits with the festival. Okay. And
that was idea Fort Lauderdale?
No, it's in Clearwater.
Or Clearwater, Florida.
Near
So
Fort Lauderdale.
okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, not far. So my idea was to get away from all this pressure to do Scientology, ironically, by joining the headquarters of Scientology, because those guys are always working. They don't really do much of the Scientology stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a little confusing. But the point is, I tried to get away, and then I didn't do well there, and I sort of dropped out of there. And so then I was stuck like in between school years again for 9th grade. And my mother had enough of me, so she sent me back to the ranch again. Only this time, I didn't go willingly. The security guards, I woke up to them on my bed in the morning, and they quite literally dragged me kicking and screaming out of my house and stuffed me in a car and sent me out to New Mexico when I was 14. How old were you?
14.
Yeah. So I was 14, and I was there this time for 3 years straight. And I became known as the kind of most neglected kid there over those 3 years, because every Christmas, every birthday, every, sibling's birthday or uncle's birthday, most kids would get a present or would go home or would see that their parents would visit them. But me, I was not even allowed to communicate with my family at all in any way for those 3 years by their request. So
by your family's request.
My mother specifically asked the ranch to not let me communicate with them anymore. So this was the beginning. I mean, there was many beginnings, but this was the real beginning of like serious problems are happening. So I was there for 3 years, and by the time I had got sent there when I was 14, the worst sort of chemicals that I had done is I got drunk one time with, ironically, kids from the previous ranch. I had smoked cigarettes. That's it. I'd never even seen weed, nothing. And back then, weed was like a even bigger sort of deal. It was more legal everywhere and everything. And I hadn't even seen it. And at the ranch, basically about 2.5 years into it, by then I had been there longer than everybody else. I was just kind of the old man of the ranch. And one of my good friends there had left and came back. Now he was a staff member. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they didn't watch him. He could do whatever he wanted. Long story short, he started smuggling in weed and alcohol first time, a bottle of rum and some weed. And then, because he was actually from nearby Albuquerque, because this ranch was in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. So he would go to his friends. And then he started sneaking in more. So then he started sneaking in methamphetamine, cocaine, LSD. And then at that time, we settled on doing LSD because if you remember, we're stuck in this ranch and there's all this night watch and securities everywhere. You can't really get away with alcohol because what are you going to do with the bottle? Where are you going to put that? You can't just keep burying them. Someone's going to find them. And like weed, the smoke is everywhere. It's obvious smell, and et cetera, et cetera. But LSD is just liquid, or you just store it on some paper. They're never going to know what that is. And they, as long as you have some sunglasses on to hide your dilated pupils, and you can figure out how to sort of act normal during the day or whatever, they can't smell it. There's no smoke there, so we started doing a lot of LSD, and that was where I really started getting into drugs. And then basically what happened is I was turning 18, and that ranch wanted to have like a success story. They didn't want me to just leave when I was 18 without having like cured me, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
And so they just pushed me through the program super quickly, like literally in 2 months. And the program normally take about a year and a half. So they just crammed me through it at the last moment. So I quote unquote graduated that place and then got sent back home. And so now I'm arriving in Florida again with a drug problem, right? Not technically addicted to anything because I'm doing LSD, which isn't physically addictive, but I'm definitely in a lot of pain, in a lot of escapism. And so that's how I got out. And that's basically how it started.
I think that's a good point you bring up. You say, I wasn't necessarily addicted, but at least to the drug per se, but you're addicted to, or you've learned how to escape your reality because you don't want to deal with stuff. So here's the best way. I don't have to deal with this shit. Let me get high, take LSD, whatever it is. Now I can kind of escape that and get out of it. And how you did that for a couple of years, right? For at least a year, right?
Well, so the LSD lasted for a few months, but we were doing it every day, all the time, like every day, and then every day and every night for weeks at a time. We would even do it, even if we didn't have enough to get us high. We would maybe if we had half a hit and we already had a high tolerance, we would just do it anyway, just to do it. I mean, we were just escapism, you're not even thinking anymore. And so then I was 17 and I was back in Florida. And my mother got me hooked up with this job, which is where she was working, which was also a Scientologist. And then I got this girlfriend who was also a Scientologist. And her father was a Scientologist, also working at that Scientology place. My mother's pressuring me even more to go into Scientology auditing, which is basically counseling and courses. So long story short, I'm back to 100%, indoctrination mode. And the pressure is even higher because she thinks I just finished this program and I'm all reformed and ready to be one of them. And meanwhile, I'm even further from my family than I was when I left because I've been massively betrayed. Now I have to apologize to them and make it seem like I did all this wrong stuff. And by then I'm already forming this habit of taking drugs. So then I started taking ecstasy with my girlfriend at the time because she was a Scientologist, but she apparently wasn't really into it either. So we started doing a lot of ecstasy down in Ybor City in Tampa, Florida. And that would last just a couple of months. But, I had this knack for going very intense with things. I mean, in a couple of months, I built my tolerance up where I was doing, the most I did was 8 double stack TNTs, which if anybody out there knows that stuff, that's a lot for a 2-month user, I was doing too much. And I ran away. I just said, I can't take this anymore. I'm not going to be a Scientologist. And I went to go live with the same guy who had been getting the drugs in the first place. Okay. So I went to Washington, still 17, freshly ran away. And then I almost immediately called my mom again and was like, I'm sorry. I was regretting it. I wanted to go back. And she told me in no unclear way, don't talk to us again. We don't want you. I don't want to hear from you anymore. I asked for my aunt's number. She said no. She turned me down completely. The only thing that she said that she would give me was the number to some guy that I didn't even know who worked at a Scientology organization up in Seattle that I could go there and maybe I could talk to him and maybe do some services. And that was it. So in 1999, she cut all ties.
So basically, she was so indoctrinated from Scientology, from that lifestyle, that if you didn't go along with that, then you were X'd out completely, pretty much.
That was my biggest sin of my whole life until then, was not being a Scientologist.
Bro, that is so crazy, man. Like, and you mentioned the auditing too. I saw a little bit about that in some stuff I was looking at yesterday. And I couldn't, what's that little machine? There's like a little machine that they were looking at, that there was like a lever or a needle on it, and it was showing like the energy or whatever. Can you I don't want to get us too far off, but that was some crazy shit right there.
Yeah, so that's they just call that an E-meter, and which I think it's short for something like electropsychometer or something stupid, but they call it an E-meter. And basically what it is it's sending an electrical current from one can, to the other, and you are the thing connecting the two. You're the conduit, right? So you hold one can in one hand and one in the other, and a small electrical current goes through you. You can't feel the current. And basically what it's measuring is the changes in resistance. Okay. So, naturally everybody, obviously you can conduct some electricity, and it's just measuring the resistance. Now that doesn't sound too weird, but why are they doing it is where it starts to get a little bit weird. So the reason that they're doing that is that they think that all of your memories from all of time, and when I say all of time, I mean all of their concept of time, which is quite literally many, many quadrillions of years, not billions, not trillions, quadrillions of years, which is way, way longer than anyone's saying that the age of the universe could possibly be. There's nobody that says it would be that far. But anyway, so they think that we've all been around that long, and that every moment of that entire time, we've been recording things around us. So we're basically like a walking security camera, and we store all this information with us. And though each picture, each individual, let's say, frame of our video has an electrical charge to it for some reason. And so when they, when you sit in auditing, they'll ask you something like, let's say they might say, have you ever, gotten in a fight? And what the principle is that just by them saying that, you'll immediately think of a time that you had a fight, and that thought will have electrical charge, and they'll read, the needle will move, and then they'll say, oh, what was that? And they'll start to talk to you about that type of thing.
And is that auditing?
That's auditing. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, and that's what your mom wanted you to do. She wanted you to be an auditor and sit behind the desk, and basically, the way I see it is you're infiltrating people's minds, really, in some sort of sense.
You are, yeah. That's exactly what you're doing. You're getting into the nitty-gritty details in every angle and every intersection and every left turn and right turn, all within somebody's mind, to basically, go through and do these like processes, like, oh, we're going to make you do this and we're going to make you do that. And that's why it's also called processing, auditing or processing, or being in session. It's all the same thing. So she wanted me to be an auditor. And the thing about Scientology is if you go high up in it, you have to also be an auditor. You can't just be the person getting it.
Well, because you're filling out reports on this shit too, right? So basically you're creating files on people who, all of their thoughts, the places they've been, where everything is in great detail about, from the inside of their minds to the external stuff that they're doing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And those are called PC folders. And so I've got somewhere around 14 huge folders filled with literally everything I've ever done with Scientology. And that's actually one of the things that I wanted to sue them for, or somehow get them back. Because the thing is, when I ran away at 17, and then my mother told me, look, don't come back. I don't want to see you again ever. That was the last time I ever saw her. And I didn't know that
crazy, bro, at
the time, obviously. So the thing is, all of that sessions and auditing, all that stuff I did, I was a minor for all of it, 100% of it. I never did 1 second when I was an adult. And so that's like, it just seems to me like, why would they be allowed to have all of this personal information about me when my she's passed away and I didn't have a father and I was a minor when this all happened. So I don't know. I talk to a lawyer or something, but you're right. They have all this documentation about.
So that's something you're actively trying to, or at least you're thinking about trying to get back, is that info, that time that you spent there. You weren't an adult. How legally can they do that, basically?
Yeah. And I think probably what they would have done is that they would have had some kind of either power of attorney type of signatures or some permission from my mother. Yeah. But I'm not a lawyer, but I suspect that I could say, okay, well, even if that was valid at some point, there's no reason it would be valid now. The people that signed it were dead, and the people that it's about are of age now. It's inappropriate. So I don't know. But as far as actively pursuing it, there are people who are actively pursuing it that I'm in touch with, and I'm kind of waiting to see how they do it, because my big issue is I'm in Asia. So it's very hard for me to do that kind of stuff. I kind of just have to wait if somebody else does it. So, did you go to Asia, if you don't mind me asking, out of any fear? Like just to get, or was it more or less just to get away? I know you took a job out there. So,
that was one of the things I thought yesterday, man. I mean, like, this has got to be, like, you know, the smear campaigns. I saw the video too, that your aunts and, you know, and I felt terrible watching that, man, to be honest. And I don't know what your connection is. You know, I'm assuming there's probably not, you know, some deep connection there, to family. Cause it seems like or from what it sounds like, you haven't talked to them in a long time, but, the purposeful, tactics used to make somebody, because you know you're not the only one this happened to make them look bad. And even what's his name, Mike Rinder, that was his job, was to do that shit, right? Was to go out and actually, if anyone spoke out, was to make them look like a terrible person. And the video that your aunts and your cousins did, it was just like, it was crazy to see that. And you could totally see they're reading shit too. It's not like hard to look at, you know?
Yeah, it was, that's a bunch there, but I went to Asia the first time in 2009. And that was because we're kind of skipping ahead past the homelessness, but basically I had already
we'll jump back into that.
I had made it a goal for myself to see Cambodia because of something someone told me while I was in school. And so once I actually had enough money, I went to Cambodia. And so that was the first time I went to Asia, but that was just for a trip. And then I moved out to Asia in 2012. And that was both a combination of just life situation and kind of just losing steam on the whole American experience, and more specifically, not so much about politics actually, but more just specifically, there was nothing really captivating me that I was doing in America, and so I was kind of just stewing in my past, and I just felt like there was nothing waiting for me anywhere. And so I'd happened to go to Asia, and I kind of just fell in love with the mystery and intrigue and just the total different environment, and actually helps me stay off of, negative habits, because there's always something exciting out there and fun to do, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why I went to Asia. And then as far as my family's video against me, most of the people in that video I had not even seen in 20 years when they made that video. So, I mean, they completely disowned me. They didn't care that I was dead or alive until I showed up on a TV show. And by the way, as the TV show was airing, their video went up. It hadn't even finished airing once by the time their attack video against me was up. And I know a lot of your listeners probably don't know exactly what we're talking about. I was on this video, this show called Leah Remini, Scientology in the Aftermath. And the only thing I talked about in that episode was what happened to me at the ranch and my relationship with my mother, and how that went, and how I kind of wished I had never been involved with Scientology. I never mentioned the rest of my family intentionally. I was trying to pick a fight with people. I'm just saying, here's what happened in my life. Okay. And then what the video that we're talking about now is, as soon as that aired on TV, all the rest of my family made a video with Scientology, and literally at the bottom of the page, it's copyright Church of Scientology. They made this video attacking me, talking about how I overdose on drugs, and I have been arrested for this and arrested for that. And then, all this stuff that, by the way, all of that happened after the ranch, but they put it in a blender and they just kind of say all these words at you, and it sounds like what they're saying. I mean, the first line of it is like, the reason Nathan ended up at the ranch is because the only other option we had was jail. And my response to that is like, jail? I was 8 years old. What are you talking about?
It didn't make much sense.
This is what makes sense in their mind. And then if you watch the rest of the video, they talk about, he was hanging out with these kids and he was doing drugs. And the whole time I'm like, I wasn't really yelling because I wasn't that upset. Because to be honest with you, I was just surprised at what they even looked like because I hadn't seen them in so long. Wow. But I almost wanted to yell at the screen and be like, that was after the ranch. Is this thing a time machine? I went to the ranch because of the things that happened after the ranch. It's just, this is the type of trickery that they try to do.
Yeah. Well, so let me back us up a little bit, and I appreciate you breaking that down, and giving a little background on it, because I thought it was an important part, and I know I jumped ahead a little bit. So if we back up, you basically you take off, you leave, and your mom tells you, like, look, I don't want any contact with you. I do have a guy who's connected to Scientology that you can connect with. Where does it kind of go from there?
So then obviously I wasn't going to connect with that guy, because the reason that she wanted me to talk to him was to do more Scientology services. So it's called the purification. I just wasn't going to do it.
Come be an auditor. I need you to be an auditor.
Yeah, that'll solve all my problems. So at that time I was living out of my friend's car, and he had a connection for LSD. So we were buying vials of LSD for $90, and it was about 100 to 110 hits. And we were sometimes able to stay on his friends' couches. And she was a methamphetamine, let's say, aficionado. She just loved it. And she sold high-grade weed to support her habit. So the arrangement was we would sell her weed for her, keep no profit, and then she would give us speed and loan us money to buy LSD and let us crash on her couch. So this is already, at 17, this is what my life had become. So we were buying these vials. And then the thing is that, if you're not familiar with selling acid, it's not like you're in, the cartel. You're not making any money, because it costs you $90. You get 100 to 110 of them. You can charge $1 to $5 each. And how often do you see anybody selling LSD or anyone doing it? I mean, it's so rare. You can never sell it. It takes weeks, months even. And so long story short, we ended up sell just enough to get gas and get hamburgers from McDonald's when they had those 29-cent, 39-cent specials. We'd buy those, or we'd go to Jack in the Box, whatever. And then we would buy another vial, and we would do the rest of it ourselves. So we just had this like little process going where we would support our own LSD habit. And then that started shifting over into methamphetamine, because basically if you mix methamphetamine and LSD, what happens is overwhelmingly your experience becomes more about the powder. Powder almost always wins in these types of situations. So plus you don't want to be having like a crazy methed out trip. That's a lot weirder and harder than it sounds. So we did that a few times, and I kind of just said, all right, enough with the LSD. I'm going to switch over to meth. I mean, obviously you don't think that way, but that's basically what happened. And so it got into a little bit more stuff, mushrooms and whatever else came along. But basically at that point, we're just doing a lot of meth. And then the winters came around, and it was just freezing cold. So now we're talking 2000 winter. I was just about 18. And so we went down to Albuquerque, where he was from, and arrived in Albuquerque, and and basically his friends let us crash on their carpet, was how that started. And so that was, his friends were, I never really have friends because I always moved around, and I never went to school for a whole year and everything. So he was my only friend. But he, on the other hand, had tons of friends. And all these guys were really heavily into drugs, drinking, partying. They all had kind of rough lives. Nobody had any money, and everybody just wanted to get wasted all the time. And so we, the kind of the good news about that for me actually was that they didn't really do meth. So I kind of stopped doing meth, and I got more into alcohol. Alcohol to the level of like, people bringing over 30 packs and 40 ounces and kegs, and they had all these friends, and was growing into parties. And we were a bunch of punk rockers, so we ended up kind of going wild with that, and just pushing wildness to the limit. Getting blacking out for the sake of blacking out. And the thing that I found comfort in with this group was that they didn't care that I was a Scientologist or anything. They had their own problems, and they weren't interested in me. And so I could just be an escape artist with them and never have to think about my past. And anytime I did start to think about my past, I just get another bottle. And that, in some weird ways, that kept me alive. Probably in retrospect, probably I would have been better off with an actual support structure in place. And this is, by the way, this is something that I was really thinking about when I was listening to some of your other interviews and your other talks is that, you know, a few years after that, when I was still homeless, I started to become more, you know, more knowledgeable about what this sort of recovery world is, right? I understand about NA and AA, and there's tons of people I meet, and there's people lapsing and triggers and all that stuff. Like you get familiar with it on the streets. I mean, it's everywhere. And the thing is that I think my story really, as it relates to that type of structure, I'm kind of like, in my opinion, I'm kind of like the cautionary tale of what happens when you don't have that. I happen to have made it through the other side, but you know what? Along the way, no one else that I was with made it. And so I happened to have gone through, I happened to landed on an island, but everybody else sank. And it's interesting for me because I can see now the value in those support structures. So my support structure back then was a bunch of crazy punk rockers with motorcycles and weapons getting wasted all the time. And so we started this gang called the Sluts in the City, which was named after this G.G. Allin song. And G.G. Allin is like sort of the most hardcore punk rocker ever, basically. And his whole message was like not caring about anything. Obviously, he didn't say it that way, but you know,
it was punk rock for sure.
Yeah, and we just identified with that because, you know, to care about something means pain, and to not care about it means no more pain. It's gone. You can just, you know, sniff, drink, party it away, and so basically, you know, we had this group of maybe about, at the peak, maybe 50 people that were kind of part of this crew. And, you know, a lot of them had weapons, and, you know, we all had whatever we had, alcohol and drugs and whatever. So eventually, though, that kind of fell apart, and I ended up hitting the road. So I just was hitchhiking by myself. And, you know, then basically what happened is I started getting back into drugs, only this time instead of meth, it was heroin. And so I traveled around most of the western part of the United States. Most of the time I was alone. Occasionally I had like what we call a road dog, which is like a friend traveling with you. So I had like my road dogs with me, or just by myself a lot, and got into heroin. And, you know, I go strung out, which is, you know, when you're, you know, physically addicted to it. I was strung out on heroin in Sacramento, in an area of Arizona, kind of inside Phoenix, called Tempe, Arizona. I was strung out there for a while, and up in Seattle, and just traveling around just by myself with nothing and no one, just suffering through life. And I even still have some like old diary that I wrote in. I was writing letters to myself and poetry about heroin and just this crazy life. And that lasted for a while, and a lot of crazy stuff happened on the road and everything like that. And then I ended up back in Albuquerque, and one of my best friends of this street kid that I met up in Portland, he died right next to me on a couch, like leg to leg, keeled over and died from heroin. And to make it worse, he was not really a heroin user. He was not really a junkie. He was just an alcoholic, but he would occasionally do some here and there. And his girlfriend, another street kid, they had run off to the bathroom together, and everyone just thought they were doing something else in there. And no, they didn't bother telling anybody they were doing drugs. So they came out, and he just died from the drugs. And everyone just thought he passed out, because he used to pass out all the time from alcohol. Yeah. So we're all just sitting there making fun of him as he's dead.
Fuck, bro. That's crazy.
So once that happened, that was a big...
How old were you about this time?
Oh, boy. This was probably about 5.5 years after that. So about 2005.
Okay.
Yeah, about 2005. So I was about 23 by now. So there's like 5+ years of being homeless. I mean, I was, you know, a lot of people say homeless, and there's all this whole sort of spectrum of homeless. So I kind of have to identify like what kind of homeless I was. So like in Sacramento, for example, because, you know, you mentioned Sacramento before we started recording.
Yeah.
It just happened to come up. I can right now draw on a piece of paper, having not been there in, 15 years. I can draw on a piece of paper exactly where the bridges are that I used to sleep under, where in the park I used to go to get my dope, right? What the J Street Mall, how to get there exactly. You know, I could tell you the entire area by heart. And so, you know, where was I sleeping? I was sleeping under the bridge, you know, and so it's that level. Like in Portland, same thing with Seattle and Tacoma, Lakewood, you know, Los Angeles, Albuquerque, all these different places. I could from memory point to places that I was sleeping.
And you were really up and down the West Coast pretty much. I mean, you're traveling around, and I mean, there's kind of I want to point out too, like, especially in the punk rock culture and in that whole environment. I don't know how much this has changed now versus in the early 2000s. I'm pretty sure it's still somewhat similar, but there's kind of a whole culture there around that, right? Street kids, traveling, just that whole scene. Unfortunately, I'm assuming there's probably still a lot of drug use and alcohol use in it. But we see these kids. I mean, I was just out in Berkeley at a terror show on Saturday. Got my hoodie on, as a matter of fact. Damn good show. But you go out to Berkeley, and I mean, it's a whole different ballgame out there, and just from like your normal small hometown feel of a, you know, a suburb or whatever. The street culture out there is it's live and popping, that's for sure. And a lot of these kids, it's sad to think that a lot of them come from broken homes. A lot of them come from you know, childhood abuse, all these things, and you want to help them, you know what I'm saying? But you can't to some extent, because people are going to do what they want to do. And for you, I mean, what was it that finally you said your homie passed away right in front of you on the couch? Like, what was it that finally made something click for you beyond that, to start to shift your mindset down the path of recovery and trying to live a better life?
Yeah. So that's kind of three things there. So one is,
yeah, I tend to do that, huh? Let me throw like four questions at you. Sorry, man, I get going.
No, it's all good. I always like to answer each thing, because I think each thing's interesting. So first of all, you're one of the only people I've actually done a podcast with or talked to that actually understands a bit about the punk rock kind of street kid culture. I mean, in my book and to a lot of other people I've talked to, I had to explain a lot of this. They don't even realize it. There's very much a homeless culture. I've met many kids who are even aspiring homeless kids. Like, they have a home and they come hang out with us on the streets and kind of pretend like they're homeless. And after a while, they become homeless. You know, it's like they want to do it even. I mean, not all of them, obviously, but, you know, even that happens. And, you know, Berkeley is, I talk a little bit in my book about going, you know, when I went to Berkeley, what I thought about that. But they're kind of mostly clicked up, and they're kind of like, they're in a sense, at least at that time, we're in a sense much more sort of fashionable about it, kind of doing it because that's the cool thing to do. Yeah. And I kind of felt like I was like on the streets because I didn't have anywhere to live. You know what I mean? I kind of felt like I don't have anywhere to live. If I did, I wouldn't be here. And then I would meet kids sometimes that were like, even if they had a home, they would want to be there because they thought it was cool. And so I didn't always get along with those people. Yeah, because it's kind of like a sense of like kind of being a poser in a sense. And the way I look at it, like you have, maybe poser is a stupid word to use right there, but it's you know, you have somewhere to go. You have a family. You have people that care about you. Like, and when you come from a spot like yourself where you're really ostracized from not just your family, but almost society in a sense too, that's some straight punk rock shit right there. That's the real, you know, that's the real culture of that. And it's dark and it's sad and it's not a good thing. So to kind of see that, I could see how you might have a little bit of animosity and be like, man, like kid, like go home, like go love your family. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't, you know, the type of person that I've always been really is like, I don't hate people, but you know, I'm not going to like, I just go somewhere else, you know, you're not my crowd. But, you know, so those are the 2 points there. And then the you're right. The third thing is that, Spit, his name was Spit, by the way, my friend that died. When he died, it wasn't enough, actually. I kind of pushed heroin away a bit but I hadn't quit, you know, I just was kind of not doing as much. And this girl basically that I knew, she knew that I did heroin, and she had convinced me that she wanted to do a documentary for some reason. She wanted to film me shooting up. And so even though I hadn't been doing it much, I was like, all right, I'll do something, see if I can impress her or whatever. So she filmed me, and I spiked up on camera, and I was, going through how to do it and everything. And I hit myself with it. And then just, I remember I was counting down for the camera, I'm like a ham. It was like 5, 4. And then boom, my eyes open, and there's some lady who looks really annoyed, hanging over me, kind of like, just being very sort of frustrated looking and kind of grabbing my arm and everything. And as I'm sort of looking around, I'm realizing that I'm handcuffed to a stretcher, and there's sheriffs all over. This is in a suburb of Albuquerque called Rio Rancho. There's sheriffs everywhere, and they're yelling out stuff like, where's the rest of your drugs? Where's the rest of it? And so long story short, I came to find out after I was in jail for a little while for that, I got out, and she told me what happened is I just fell over and just OD'd right there and turned blue and purple and white, and she was breathing for me. And she wasn't a junkie, so this is her first time even really being around it. So she just panicked, called 911, said someone's overdosing, which if you do that to 911, they just send the police over as well. Sort of if you're a junkie, then you would know that what you're supposed to do is call them and say somebody's having trouble breathing. Yeah. They don't show up with the batons and the pepper spray, but I don't blame her for that or anything. I'm just saying. So they all show up. Yeah. She had no idea. So, and she saved my life. She was breathing for me for what she described as for 10 minutes while they were coming. Yeah. Wow. And so and then I was in jail for that one. And then the thing is, after I got out of jail, which was only a few weeks, after I got out of there, within a week I OD'd again on heroin. Right. So I was on the downward. I mean, I was towards the end there. And the night that I OD'd again, I was with junkies that time, and they had this thing called Narcan, which is they inject you, and it basically just takes you right out of heroin. It's only for opiates. And they had that, and they used it on me. And the same night I was popping pills, and I was out drinking at a punk show. And I just did not care. I didn't care anymore. I was just ready to die. And, I had tried to commit suicide when I was 15 at the ranch, when I was 11 in Florida. And I had, really intensely considered suicide even when I was 9, and all that's in the book as well. But the point is, life was rough for me, and at least I felt it was rough for me at those times. But now, when I was in my early to mid 20s, I was just over life. I just didn't care anymore. I didn't care. Yeah. I mean, I injected beer, thinking at the time, by the way, that the bubbles would probably kill me. I don't even know if that's true, but at the time I thought if you inject a bubble, it could go into your heart and you could die. Yeah. And I didn't have any dope, and I was trying to kick dope, and I ended up in Salt Lake City, and I just injected beer because I was so fiending, which some people out there know what I mean. And then I injected whiskey, and I just didn't care if I died anymore. And
did it fuck you up? Did it what does that do?
Didn't do anything. The beer doesn't do anything, but if you inject whiskey, you get drunk from it. Believe it or not.
That's the first time I've ever heard that, bro. That is insane. Damn, dude. I mean, that's a good example of the insanity of addiction right there. Like you couldn't get what you needed. So fuck it. Let me try this. You know what I mean? Let me see if this will work. It may kill me, but hey, it's a try. And I want to point out one more thing too, man. I think this is really important. You've kind of, you kind of framed up, the culture of I don't care. I really don't care if I live or die. That punk rock attitude of kind of fuck the world type of thing. I know I've carried that, and I don't really carry it anymore, but I carried it for a long time. I just did not care. And what that did is, and you alluded to it earlier, it relieved all of that stress and pressure and reality, and it made everything go away. I completely I just did not care, and it felt so good to not care. And I want to say that, for those out there listening, there's a piece of that you can find in recovery. And I've been able to tap into it, and it's a constant daily process, but that's why it's called recovery. And it's giving up control. It's giving up, it's surrendering. And it's the matter of, for me, having faith and understanding that I don't have to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders anymore. And I used to do that, or I used to get to relieve that by having that attitude. I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't really care what happens to me, what happens to them. Now it's different. I cannot carry that weight because I know that I don't have to, that I'm not able as a man to carry that weight across, every day of the daily grind. Some days are better than others, no doubt. Like, recovery isn't all, perfect and rainbows and puppy dogs is I've heard some people say, which is kind of a weird, stupid analogy, but you know what I'm getting at. So there's hope out there is what I'm getting at, man. And, you can have that same kind of attitude and still be punk rock and still be like a good person and enjoy life. And so I want you, I want to finish up where you're going, but I really want you, Nathan, if you don't mind, to get into what life is like today too, and how you've been able to go from this really terrible upbringing and, just some of the worst shit, man. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. And like, thank you for sharing like your heart today and stuff too, man. I think it's pretty amazing, the man that you've been able to turn your life into. But where does that go from there? And then what is your life like today, man?
Right. So that's a very interesting point you made there. So that actually dovetails pretty nicely into how I got out. I know that your last question was, how did I get out? And I actually haven't answered that yet. So I'm right there now. So I had died in my mind. I had died. My friend had actually died. I was out of touch with reality. I was at the rock bottom. And I decided to take a break from heroin. So I just couldn't think about it. And I just took like a day or two, which is already hard. And then when I started to have an urge again, I just left the city. I literally ran from my problem. I said, I'm going to go to another city where I don't know where to get dope, because I was already a traveler anyway. So I just went to another city, don't know where to get it. Why was I avoiding it? Where did the strength come from? It wasn't even strength of like, I want to quit doing heroin. It was just like, I don't want to do it right now. And so that was the initial thing, was like, I just need to think about this. I need to think about what, like, I was just jarred. I was like, what is going on in my life? Then I started to take stock. And by this time, you have to realize, we really condensed 7 years. So by this time, I was really starting to think to myself, like, okay, I started on this path. I didn't care about anything, and I was ready to die again and again and again. And I'm not dead. It's like, I can't die, or I won't die. Something won't kill me. Whatever it is, what I'm doing now, it's not working. This isn't working for me. And other people are dying and losing and suffering around me, and I'm suffering and losing too. So I had by then temporarily not been doing drugs for, let's say, 4 or 5 days a week, right in that area when I started having these thoughts. I went to a party and everyone was drinking and hanging out. And I was telling somebody, look, I was like, now that I'm not doing all this stuff, I'm just drinking, everything just seems really boring. Like, I feel like I've been to this party already. I already know all the drama. I know that lady that I can hear her yelling right now, that girl over there, I never even met her before. I can kind of guess what this night's going to end up like with her. She's going to be mad at somebody because they said whatever. Like, I just started predicting everything around me. I was just getting bored. And the guy was like getting annoyed with me telling him all these, like, what do you want? And I was like, I don't know, man. I just feel like I just want to do something. Like, I want to do something. I don't know what. And the guy said, well, why don't you do computers? I said, all right. Guess we'll do computers. Just the most random thing for someone to say at a party.
So funny, dude.
It's a total dumb thing that, you hear 1,000 times everywhere you go. Why don't you this? Why don't you that? Why don't you do computers? And I was like, oh, all right, sure.
So great.
And so at that time, I was living under a tunnel, under the streets in Albuquerque. I came back to Albuquerque. I was living in the tunnel, and I had nothing. And I hooked up with this girl, and she was what we used to call house punk. So she was like a punk rocker, but she had a home. And so sometimes I would stay on her bed and everything. And just staying with her, she wasn't really like a crazy punk like we were. She wasn't really into like wild and crazy or anything. So that actually was nice for me. It was just kind of, she just like, oh, let's watch a movie. Oh, let's eat some dinner. And so I kind of got a little taste of like normal life again. And then I started to feel a little bit kind of guilty, or kind of like, oh, I should help her. You know, she's like, she's always buying me food and renting movies and everything. So I started to think, like, how do I get money? You know, I had no driver's license, no ID, no social security card. No, I didn't even know my social security number, no passport, no family, you know, nobody could vouch for me, no work history, no, you know, I had 2 full years of education. And, you know, if you're being very charitable, you could say I had an 8th grade education. And how do I get money? I live in a sewer and I'm smelly. I have one set of clothes.
Yeah.
And I'm an addict and I smell. So that began a kind of a long and tough period of time, where not tough mentally, but sort of just tough practically. Like, how do I get all this stuff? And basically I ended up going to this drop-in center, which is kind of like where you go if you're on the streets, the kind of, you know, donation-led place. Maybe they'll give you some food if they have some, whatever. And this lady was generous enough to help me get my birth certificate. And then I went to the Social Security office, and, you know, after a lot of back and forth, I was eventually able to convince them to get me one by staying at a shelter and getting the guy at the shelter to like write a note that I said that I was this person. And then sort of this complicated thing, but I slowly started piecing together just the basic things so that I even could apply for any kind of job in the first place. And then I started doing day labor, right? So I wake up at like 3, 4 in the morning, whatever, and go out and just sit out there and hope that somebody needs help moving some wood or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I went from that. I went to temp agencies. So I applied at a couple of temp agencies, and one of them didn't take me. But then I think Excel Staffing didn't take me. But then this other one called the Deco did take me. And then I started doing these temp jobs, which were, you know, tough. And then I just basically kept pushing and pushing. Then I knew somebody who knew somebody at a Wendy's. Yeah. So I got hired at a Wendy's, and I had been buying clothes with the money that I got at the other place, and I was showering at her place. And, you know, at this time period in my life, you know, I was still very much screwed up in the head. I mean, the drugs had really done a number on me, and I was pretty damaged, but I could at least, you know, kind of do okay at like a Wendy's type of job.
Yeah.
And so this is the beginning of the curve up, where I'm starting to actually turn around. And so basically what happened then is I decided I wanted to go to school, because like I knew that if I worked at Wendy's and I work at some other place, I'm just kind of hopping around these random industries. Yeah. But I had this goal. I want to do computers, whatever that means. And so I needed to get my FAFSA done, which is kind of the like federal application for like student loans and grants and whatever. But I still wasn't 24 years old, and you have to be 24 to not need your parents' tax information. So I had to call my mother. Okay, so I called her after I hadn't talked to her in 7 years, and I looked up her number. By then, like the internet was around and everything, so I looked her up on the internet somehow, and I got in touch with her, and she just flat out rejected me. It was like, no way, I'm not helping you. You know, she only took the call because it was like an unknown number. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I ended up having to just wait until I was 24 so that I could apply for a Pell Grant and student loans. And the one good thing about being homeless this entire time, maybe the only good thing at that time, was I didn't care about student loans. I was like, if I don't succeed, I am never going to pay them back. What are they going to do? I live in a tunnel. Yeah. You know what I mean? They're like, all right, I don't care about that. So they're like, oh, it's this percent payback, you know, whatever. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Great. Oh, sounds great. Yeah. Yeah. And so they gave me just enough with the Pell Grant and the student loans, just enough to get into a vocational college, like a community college. And by then I started working at a tech support company. It was all scripted, you know, don't get excited. It was just literally like a checklist. You're like the first people, have you tried plugging your computer in? That kind of guy. Yeah. And, but that was paying me tons of money. It was like $9 an hour. I was like, I couldn't believe it. And so I even bought like a used motorcycle from this guy that I knew. And I, you know, slowly starting to piece things together. And I started going to school finally at 24. And 2 months into it, I got into a motorcycle accident, which was the other person's fault. Shattered my wrist into tons of pieces, damaged my shoulder, all this stuff. And so as far as from like a addiction point of view, by this time I was drinking a lot compared to how I am now, but not compared to how I used to be. So in other words, I would drink maybe, I don't know, a bit each day, you know, but not really get drunk, maybe drunk once or twice a week, and which was nothing for me at that point. That was basically sober at that point. So, and I wasn't doing much drugs. But the thing is, I had this major accident, which took almost 6 months to recover use of my arm and everything. And they gave me, you know, morphine. And the thing is, morphine doesn't do anything to you if you've been doing heroin for years. They don't do anything. And they don't believe you when you say that because they think you just want more drugs. So you just basically suffer. So I spent a lot of time screaming into the crevice of my couch, you know. And so I didn't know what to do. And I knew I was in trouble because now I wasn't going to be able to go to school. And I was still in Albuquerque. And I knew myself enough to know I might slip back into old habits. So I ran again. I said, all right, I'm going back up to Seattle because Seattle was fun, you know, at least when I was on the streets. Let's go up there. Let's try to make a life up there, I was telling my girlfriend. And so we went up there. She was still paying for everything. I had a little bit of money, but, you know, the bulk of everything was still her. And so we went up to Seattle, and I got into a place called Seattle Vocational Institute under the same type of situation. It was just the only one I could afford.
Yeah.
All the other ones had these non-resident fees where it was like triple price, except for this one. And I wanted to, quote unquote, do computers. So I just took the only computer class that they had, which was called a network technician program. I was like, I don't know what that is. Sounds like nerd stuff. Good, great.
Let's do it.
And so oddly, that class happened to be, because there was no non-residence fee, there was a ton of people there who just wanted visas because it was the cheapest one for non-residents. So there was a bunch of immigrants, and like there was a high school kid there, there was a grandma, there was a couple from Iran, and there was like a dude from Cambodia and another guy from Ethiopia. It was just sort of this mishmash of people, which was, you know, fine. But the thing is, most of them didn't really want to learn about computers. And that class had clearly been that way for a long time. So the curriculum was extremely basic. It was like, here's what DOS is. Here's what YouTube is. Here's what a CD-ROM is. And my problem was, I had just gone through basically the hardest thing in the world to actually be able to go to school. I had spent like 2 years of a ramp-up time from going from living under a tunnel to finally being able to show up in a school. And I was not going to accept learning what websites are and how a CD-ROM works. So I talked to there was 3 teachers, and I talked to them, and I said, look, I'll do your curriculum, but I'm not going to get through this 9-month program and just know some basics about computer hardware. That's not happening. And they said, all right, look, you get through your curriculum. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you 2 servers. We're going to give you 2 workstations. We're going to buy you any books that you want. We want you to build a bind DNS server in Linux. We don't exactly know what that is, but we want you to figure it out and build it for us. We want you to build this IP cop firewall in Linux, because we're going to start embedding them in these little pieces of hardware, try to sell them. Again, we don't really know what that is. We want you to figure it out. And so I said, okay, Linux, I've heard of that. It's like an operating system or something. So I said, okay, well, what's like the command line version of that? Of course, they're all command line version, but at that time I didn't know. So I said, like, what's like the hard version of that? Because I want to do it for real. And so they told me the name of this OS called Gen 2. And it took me about a week to install it the first time. This is the level of difficulty that it takes. I was all throughout the handbook, chat rooms, I had books, and it took me about a week just to get it installed full time. And I just, over the next 9 months, I just kept showing up. You know, I still had my mohawk, still had, you know, slut in the city tattooed on my fingers. You know, I was still spray painting my hair. You know, people thought I was nuts.
Yeah.
And just like an urban, you know, community college. Like my best friend there was this like black grandmother chick who just thought it was hilarious. Come over to my house and like listen to my rap CDs and stuff. And just thought I was like the weirdest punk rock dude, you know?
Yeah.
And so I just spent the next the 9 months just crash coursing myself. I was like, I'm going to teach myself then. I don't care. And I just dove into it like never before. And I put all the energy, I kind of transformed a lot of the negativity that I had into this energy, this like coal burning in the engine to keep me focused. And I showed up every day, and I took a bicycle, I took a bus, I walked, I didn't care, whatever it took. I got there, and I showed up, and I did it day after day after day, 9 months straight. And by the time I left that place, they were offering me a job to work there for $15 an hour. I turned them down because I thought I could do better. I said, no, I think I can do better than that. And I was nice about it, obviously, but
yeah.
And then I went, applied on Craigslist and everything, and I found a place, and they basically said, this was in Tukwila, Washington, and they said, well, you're not really qualified, but because you've done this, and because you've done that, and because you've done this in only 9 months, and you taught yourself, we know that you can teach yourself what we're doing too, so we'll hire you. And then they eventually laid me off, and I moved down to LA, and I got another job that almost mirrored that, almost exactly. By then I had covered my my Slut in the City tattoos on my knuckles. I covered them up with like this pattern, which is actually based on CPU schematics. So I looked at a CPU, blew up the ink dye from it, and said, like, that little area over here, that little area over there, put that on this knuckle, that knuckle. So I covered up with something. And it was just part of this like gang cover up tattoo for free type of program or whatever. So I got those done for free. And then, so I'm sitting in there, and I'm telling this guy in LA in this job interview about my tattoos, because that's the first thing people notice, of course, is like, oh, who's this criminal looking dude? Yeah. And I told him, well, yeah, this is the this is the math coprocessor from the first CPU that I enjoyed as a kid, and I got Linux tattooed on my wrist over here. And so they look at that, and then they go, okay, and you've done this and this and this and that amount of time. So the response was almost exactly the same. He said, well, you're not qualified for this position, but here's how much we're going to offer you, which was more than I even asked for. He said, because I know you can learn it. You're smart. Let's do this. So I stayed at that place for like 2.5 years. And obviously by then I wasn't homeless anymore, of course. And I was started out as like a systems administrator, and then it was a network administrator. And then by the end of that 2.5 years or so, almost 3 years, I was what you would call a systems architect. So I was, taking charge of and or participating in these large build outs for companies like Verizon, Gatorade, Oscars and Grammys, which are not the real company names, but that's what you guys would know them as. And like skateboard.com, snowboard.com, and just on and on. All these big like companies, they're web architectures. And so by the end of that, I was like a bona fide guy doing computers. I was doing it. And so then that was somewhere around, I'm going to say 2010-ish.
You ever think about finding that guy and then just saying, hey, John, I do computers. The dude that asked you, that's so epic right there. You do computers, bro. Like, all right. I mean, when people ask you what you do, you gotta say that, right? I do computers. I mean,
I do. Yeah. What do you do?
So great.
Nothing. Everything. Whatever.
I love it, man. It's so good.
Yeah. It's definitely been one of the most powerful random comments in my life.
Yeah.
And so then basically I got another job, and it, again, from Craigslist, just happened to be at a visual effects company. So it's a company that does like CGI for films, major motion pictures. And that was in Venice, California, part of LA. And then that company moved to Santa Monica. And by this period of time, I was already like, I was pinnacle of a certain trajectory of technical careers. In other words, there was the only way I could really get higher up would be to become management. And so I was very good at what I was doing, but I had to learn their industry, their particular problems. So worked there for a little while and impressed some of the sort of right people. And a producer there and a visual effects supervisor that worked on Avatar, they teamed up and did a startup company in Utah, of all places. I didn't realize at the time for some reason, but they were Mormons and they wanted to move back out to Utah and do the startup company. And they told me, we want you to leave that company and come to our startup. What would it take? And I told them, don't worry about it. Because at that time I had 3 monitors. And when I lift my eyes above the horizon of my 3 monitors, I'm looking at the beach. Like it's right in front of my face, the water of Santa Monica, right by the promenade. I was like, there's no way I'm leaving this place. Yeah. And then I thought, the worst they can say is no. So I just wrote them an email. I said, well, I'll take this much money. I want a month off. I don't want to work for anybody, work entirely from home. I want equity, whatever. I just was like, all right, this is what it would take. And their answer was, okay, we'll write it up. And so I was like, okay.
Damn.
So I moved out to Utah and
got a couple of wives, right?
just the one. Yeah. No, but it was nice. It was the first time I actually lived, like had a house. I mean, I didn't buy it. But, was in a home. Like, wow, it's not just an apartment. Wow. Which was pretty nice. And actually, Utah is a really nice place. It's pretty. I mean, it's got its own problems, but it's actually a lot nicer than I thought it was. And then that company basically did a lot of startup mistakes where they kind of scramble and they get, they run around with like chickens with no heads on. They're kind of doing a lot of the wrong stuff. And after about a year, it started to implode. And they said, hey, maybe we're going to do this merger with this company out in China, of all things, somewhat totally randomly to me. Like, okay, that sounds weird. And they said, well, you're the director of technology. We want to send you out there so you can check and see if this technologically is even feasible. And so this is about the end of 2011. So then 2012 rolls around, January-ish. They send me out to China, deep into China, like a town of 110,000 people in the middle of the country to check this out. And basically, then while I was out there, the company basically dissolved. And so I just said, all right, I'm just going to stay out here, start doing some remote work from the web hosting company that I was working for before. So then I was working at night from, because it's American time, would be nighttime where I was. So I was working at night and traveling the day. And I spent a couple years just traveling, wandering the earth like Cain, just all throughout Asia, Southeast Asia, cities within China, just all over the place. And then after a while, that kind of got, there's a lot of drinking going on there because I was just by myself and still kind of escaping, breakups and just my life, even though I had done computers and I was successful in that way, that doesn't solve all your problems, just because I had money and had a home didn't mean I was magically happy every second of the day. And so then I decided, I need some stability. I just need to be in one place where people know who I am and I'm responsible for something. So in 2014, I decided either I was going to learn Mandarin Chinese or I'm going to go get a job in China so I can see what it's like to work with Chinese people. And I applied to be, like an IT manager at the largest Asian-based visual effects company called BaseFX, and that's in China. And I also looked for school, and they immediately were like, yes, we want you. So I was living in Thailand at the time. So I went up to Beijing and met with them. This is now mid to late 2014. And they said, yes, we want you. After a couple months, I got all the visas, everything worked out, and I started. And I was promoted after the sort of probationary period to the IT manager. And then in about a year, I was promoted to the IT director. And then I was promoted to the CTO. So I spent a couple years managing about almost 100 staff in 6 cities, in 3 countries, in 2 languages. So
you speak Mandarin? Do you speak Chinese?
I speak enough to, especially technical Mandarin, but I speak enough to understand about 80% of common language.
So, so you can hold you can pretty much hold a conversation, get your work done, that kind of stuff with someone. Yeah,
basic stuff. The weird thing though is because I had an assistant the whole time, so actually I can understand Chinese way better than I could speak it. Because, when the server's down or whatever, you don't have time to practice your Chinese. So you just say it in English. And then she'll translate it, and now you've learned how to say it. So I can understand about 80% of what any random Chinese person is talking about, but I can only say about maybe 15%. Very low speaking skills. So I was we had offices in Malaysia, 3 in China, 1 in Los Angeles. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4 in China, 1 in Los Angeles, and 1 in Malaysia. And so that's kind of the top of, my game for tech. I kind of was like, all right, I don't really want to go bigger than this. This is kind of, it all started from somebody saying, why don't you do computers? And now I'm friggin', doing hundreds of job interviews and hiring people all across, I'm not even, at that point, I wasn't even doing computers anymore. It's just management.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to point out too, bro, because I love the whole sequence of that story. Like the power of thought, the power of a seed that's planted into someone's mind, the power of an idea where you can take something and go step by step and start from the very, very, very bottom of living under a bridge or in a sewer pipe and taking it all the way up to, directing multiple companies, people, learning, teaching yourself. And the thing I want to point out about that, because I get questions and have conversations a lot about, well, how do I do this? How do I stay sober? How do I, and a lot of people think, including myself at one point, that there was just like this magic fucking wand that was going to come down and fix everything. There's a lot of visions about that, and a lot of excuses in that victim mentality. But I want to point out, this is one of my favorite lines, and I live by it, is just show up. And you actually said it earlier. You said, I just showed up. And you just got to fucking show up. Just show up and do the next right thing. And you got to put the work in. And like you put the work in. You started and you went step by step. You fucking worked at Wendy's for however many months. I'm sure that wasn't your favorite thing to do. It's probably not but you did it. And you went step by step by step by step, and you were patient, and you did the next thing that God or the universe or whatever you want to call it put in front of you, and you did it. And I just think that's so rad, bro. So I just wanted to kind of point that out for people listening. Like, just show up and put the work in, and don't trip on expectations. The shit will come, it'll come to you, and you'll figure it out as you go on, man. So yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? You touched on something there that hits really close to home, which is that one of the big sort of realizations that I had when I was thinking about, back when I was at the tail end of my homelessness, when I was realizing, like, I'm not dead, for some reason I'm still here.
Yeah.
The other thing that was really hitting me at that time is exactly what you just said, which is like, look, I'm not going to walk down the street and someone's going to see me and say, we want you to be the singer in our next band.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, you're really super cool. We want you to be in the movie. We want, it's just not going to happen. It isn't going to happen. No one is going to come and scoop me up and fix my life and tell me that they, here you go. Now you're rich and we'll take care of you and the world is sorry.
Yep.
And it sounds really stupid to talk about it, but that's just, in a weird way, that's almost what I thought was going to happen. It just doesn't happen, And you're right. I worked at Wendy's for months, and each thing is a baby step. And everything you just said is totally almost perfect. It's like, when I was at Wendy's, I had 11 managers. All of them were women. There's night shift managers, general managers, regional, all these different things. And of those, a few of them were lesbians, and a few of those were like hated men. Okay, a couple of them. Mm-hmm. And I was a man, and for better or for worse. And I was like a little tattooed, hungover guy. And those particular managers were very sure to yell at me a lot and be very mean to me while flirting with being nice to all the managers and everything. And I suffered through that. And I made $6.25 an hour. And I did the night shift so I could get that extra 25 cents an hour, because I was thinking that's going to add up. And you know what? When they were throwing away salads at night, I would try to be super nice to the manager so they would let me eat some of them, let me take some of them home. And at that time, I was staying with my friend. He would let me sleep on the couch of this lady's house who I barely knew, but she was a vegan. And so I couldn't even bring meat home. So I had to, bring just the salads home. And sometimes, life wasn't fun. I didn't have anything going on. And then, I worked at the temp agency. I worked at a plastic mold injection factory where I literally just stood there like a freaking robot. The plastic comes down in these tubes. I open this thing up, I pull this thing out, do some this, that, the other thing, and then I just do it again for 8 hours straight. And you know what? I never thought that the next thing was going to magically solve all my problems. You're absolutely right. Just keep doing it. Keep my eye out for the next thing. Don't drop out. Don't just go home and say, screw it. no, I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to keep my eyes, open. And there's always another opportunity just waiting for you.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
when I was at Wendy's, the thing that really got me going was I talked to the lady who was working the cash register, and I said, how long you been here? Just chit-chatting, because you're so bored. It's when nobody's there. And she said she'd been working there for 7 years. And when she told me that, I was like, all right, I'm getting out of here. This is it. I need to find another job.
I do computers, bitch. I ain't fucking flipping burgers forever.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny,
I've got to do computers. But you're absolutely right. It's just showing up and just keep doing it, and just keep your eyes open, because something will come. And you know what? It didn't come the first week I was at Wendy's. It didn't come when I wanted it to, right? Mm-hmm. People talk to me now and they say, they say stuff to me like, oh, you're so lucky. I'm like, I'm not lucky. I'm 36 years old, and I'm still don't feel normal. Most of my life was spent on Scientology and homelessness and drugs. So I don't feel lucky. I feel like I'm somebody that's suffered a lot, and I'm not dead. And most of the people that I knew from back then are dead. Yeah. So I don't really feel lucky. But the point is that you can get through it. And this is kind of where like almost where the discussion began, because I'm kind of a cautionary tale, because the thing is, I did it, if you'll notice, with no support structure. I didn't go to NA meetings. I didn't go to AA meetings. I didn't have a group or family. I did it myself, but almost no one else that I was with made it. They're all dead. Yeah. Or they're still there somewhere in the gutter. And so the point is that, you can not listen to these kinds of podcasts. You can not go to meetings. You can not, get help from your family and from your community. And yes, technically you could make it. You could be another me, but believe me, the chances are very low. And if I were to do it over again, I would definitely do it with a community, because it was torturous. It was horrible.
Yeah, that's good, man. That's the title or the topic for our next our live podcast we're doing in a couple of weeks is stepping into community, because it's so important to have those people around you that are building you up and giving you motivation and support to do something else. And it's funny, man. I think back to the girl. I didn't catch her name. I don't even know if you said it, but the girl who was a punk rocker, but kind of had a spot and kind of like brought you in and started you on that path of like some sort of normalcy in some sense. And when I think about that, she was kind of the start of your community in a sense. You know what I mean? Like gave you that little tiny bit of something normal to kind of spring you up and get you off on that path. And man, what an important thing it is. So if we kind of tie this thing up, man, and wrap this up, because I gotta take a leak so bad right now, bro. What is I think I drank too much coffee this morning, man. I had a couple cups that I got up at about 4:15 so we could do this, and I'm super, super excited to do it, but the time difference, like you said, working with China and the States is a little bit tough. Yeah. But if you kind of wrap this up, like, obviously you've learned a lot through this whole process, and you're continuing to do so. What does it look like for you today in recovery and just trying to stay sober and live a positive lifestyle? That kind of thing. Yeah, and then next to that, what advice can you give anybody else out there listening, man, who's maybe going through it and just doesn't know where to turn?
Right. So the story that I just went through leads us up to exactly 1 month ago. That's when I decided to resign from that company. And the reason I wanted to resign is because I was kind of done with doing computers for now. I mean, obviously I still toil around and mess with it, but professionally, I kind of want to take a break from that, and I want to focus more on getting my story out and talking to people and, writing my book and just taking, doing what I want to do for a little bit. And so as far as, with drugs and alcohol for myself, it is night and day from those days. I don't need to escape. I don't need to escape because I built the life around me through hard work that I appreciate. And I remember very clearly, because it lasted for a long time, I remember all that stuff. I remember it all very clearly. I remember hearing other people say, oh, if you're sober, everything's much better and it's all more, And I remember thinking like, yeah, sure. Because I thought I had tried being sober because I had stopped drinking, stopped doing drugs for a few days. And I said, well, this sucks. I went right back to it. And I didn't really get what they meant. And now I really get it, which is that I've been sober off of drugs for such a solid amount of time. It has become my new core. That's who I am as a sober person. So if somebody comes around me with dope or with meth or whatever, I don't have any urge to do it. It's not interesting to me. I wouldn't even do it if they, someone paid me to. It's just, I don't need it anymore. It's gone. It's just gone from my life. And then, as far as alcohol goes, I would say I probably drink once a month or something, once every couple months. I don't really like getting drunk. I don't even enjoy drinking. It's usually just because, I feel like I have to because a bunch of other people are around or whatever. But I kind of do that. I do, I'm at the point now where I would say I'm solidly past the line. So I'm kind of like, all right, well, I can have a drink. I don't care because I know for 110% sure that I am controlling myself. Like I know that I'm not going to fall back into any old habits or anything. And it takes a long while to get there. And I would say this. Life is way better now than it was back then. Way better. I got a great girlfriend. I live in a great apartment. I'm traveling the world, and I got 2 wonderful cats. I have no urges for drugs. I don't even have any alcohol in the house at all. No need for it, and I don't miss it. That's the key point. It's not like I'm trying to do that. I don't even care. It's kind of like saying, how's your life been without all the stuffed elephants? It's like, I don't need stuffed elephants. I guess other people like them. It's not my thing. And so that's how I'm feeling now. It's just totally not a part of my life. And other than talking about it with people who, and remembering how it was once part of my life. And there is still obviously residual mental effects. There's my veins, which will never return. There's, ultra sensitivity to sugar. There's, I still have PTSD and I still have insomnia and I still have all these problems. But you know what? I just buck up and I just say, I'm going to get through it. And I don't need medication for that. I don't need self-medication for that. If it's something serious, I'll talk to the doctor. But I just don't need the chemicals. So that's kind of where I'm at with drugs. I just am totally over it. And as far as advice, I would say that don't be a sucker. Don't try to do it yourself. You're not as strong as you think you are by yourself. You're just going to get crushed by the weight of these drugs. They're chemical. It's like physics. Drugs get in your brain and they physically control you. It's like saying, I'm going to outwill my own gravity to the ground. It's just not going to happen. You can tell yourself it's going to happen. No, you need other people to stand around you and hold you up. Then you can get your feet off the ground. Yeah. So that's the main thing that I kind of realized listening from your talks and thinking about how NA works and AA works and kind of the recovery options that I've seen in the past is really that the thing that would have gotten me out of homelessness and despair a lot faster than 7 years would have been having these types of discussions available and having a community that could lift me up. So I would say do it.
Do they have like recovery communities in China? Like, do they have it just like they do here, or is it pretty?
There's no drugs over here, dude.
Yeah, there's like that. So there's not any of that really issues in that society because it's very tight knit, right?
They don't have that.
Safe way to put it. Yeah.
There's not. I mean, I've never met you have some drug dealers, but those are for foreigners. It's not for the Chinese people. So weirdly, you have some people will come up here, Nigerians especially, will hang out in like tourist places and sell to the tourists because the local population, they're just not interested. They think they have a much more negative stigma against drugs than Americans do. They don't have the culture of like, oh, I'm cool because I do drugs. They don't have that.
Totally different. Damn, that's crazy, bro. Yeah, man. Well, good stuff, dude. And good luck with the book, man. We'll make sure to put the links to your book if anyone out there listening wants to check it out. That'll be in the show notes. Where can folks find you at? If anyone wants to reach out to you, find more information, Nathan, where can they do that?
Yeah, so you can always hit me up at nathanrich.online. And then I kind of made my Facebook pretty easy to remember, which is just my Facebook is Face Nathan Rich, and my Twitter is Tweet Nathan Rich, so it's all right. And my book is called Scythe Tleppo, so that's Scythe, and then the second word is Tleppo, and you can get on Amazon. Right now it's Kindle. The paperback will be coming out here probably in about a week, and then I'll also do a hardback, and then I will be doing an audio version, which is going to take probably a month. Yeah. And then I'm going to do a Chinese translated version, which I will have to rewrite to censor a lot of the drug-related stuff because you literally can't even talk about it over here. That's how much they don't like it.
Damn, that's crazy.
Yeah. There's some benefits to censorship, I mean, the culture doesn't exist here.
Yeah. I know that's true. I mean, that's a good point because my first thought was, gosh, the censorship. And we hear a lot about, obviously, in the States, especially all the shit going on right now, media, different countries battling it out, political, geopolitics, all that stuff. And we hear a lot about China, obviously, the social credit scores, all that kind of stuff. It's definitely interesting. And, that's the first thing I thought when you said that. Wow, man, just like severe censorship. But at the same time, to point out the fact, like you said, nobody does drugs over here. Now, whether it's because they can't or they don't want to, I think that's kind of another little branch of that tree, I guess. But that's a good thing, I guess. Nobody's shooting dope or shooting whiskey or shooting beer into their veins either, right?
Exactly right. And so I would just say also, just so you know about China, is that almost everything you hear in the news is weird, misleading, wrong. Like, I mean, I saw just some video the other day on New York Times talking about the medical, the crisis of the medical system in China. And I'm sitting there with my Chinese girlfriend. We made like a 25-minute video explaining how almost literally everything that they say in the video is completely false or misunderstood. They have the wrong city listed. They're translating what the people are saying totally incorrectly. I mean, the whole thing. So it's take it with a grain of salt.
I'd like to point out, and I agree with that too, with media that comes through, you got to be real careful on what you're looking at and who it is. I don't think the New York Times has reported an accurate story in probably the last 20 years. So I don't doubt it.
Yeah, it was quite shocking. I mean, literally it was like, it would show footage, and even I understood this much Chinese. It shows a footage of a lady saying, oh, all these people are in line and one of the doctors went home. So like, I don't know, how many can they see? And then in English, the subtitle says, yeah, the doctor went home, and so they can only see 7 or 8 people. I'm like, what? She didn't say those numbers. She's not even saying anything. She's asking a question. It's that type of thing where they're making it sound worse than it is.
Yeah.
But, I think, look, recovery is a long road. If you're going to do it alone, you're probably going to fail. You need to have other people to support you, especially people that understand and don't judge you for not being perfect. And, I wasn't perfect. It's not, we had to tell a quick version of my story, but I didn't just all of a sudden one day 100% off of everything and, everything rode off into the sunset. I mean, I relapsed tons of times, but it's about picking yourself back up and not taking that defeat. Nothing is going, if you are alive, you have not been defeated.
That's good right there. I like that. Well, good stuff, man. I appreciate you coming on That Sober Guy, man. It's been fun. I know we did kind of condense that down. For those out there listening, the book is Scythe Tleppo, My Survival of a Cult, Abandonment, Addiction, and Homelessness. If you want to hear the full version of Nathan's story, be sure to pick up that book. I'm stoked that you're going to do it on the audio version. I'm an audio guy. That's why I'm into podcasting. So I will be looking forward to checking that out when it comes out. Nathan Rich, man, it's been good, man. Thank you for coming on the show, bro. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Shane. See you, everybody.
Check us out at thatsoberguy.com. Connect with us on Instagram at RealThatSoberGuy and at Shane Raymer on Twitter. Peace, love, respect. Keep your blood clean.